it already has happened on a biological level for people. So learning how to create from wholeness then creates this crazy thing where you feel so amazing. You feel so in love with life. You feel so grateful to be alive that you want other people to feel the way you feel.
I'm your host, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Let's begin.
In the world, a new model of change. You are leading us fearlessly, passionately, relentlessly, wholeheartedly into the new paradigm of how we see ourselves and one another and the planet. So you're guiding us back to our divinity through science, though. So you have been brilliant at monitoring and gathering data from early on in your work, because as you say, the modern language of mysticism is science. So you are leading the way in terms of what we are capable of and documenting what's going on in our brains and bodies whilst you're doing it. And we are at a very exciting time, aren't we? Not just in history, but I think in your career, where you have now got many prestigious universities wanting to study your work and what on earth your students are doing. So you've often said to us, let's not wait for science to tell us what's possible. Let's have science come and study us to catch up. And it's happening. So I'm really excited, and I'd love to get into some of that research. But before we get into that, I'd like to start here. So you run week-long events around the world, literally taking 1,000, 200,000 people sometimes at a time beyond themselves, knocking them off their current timelines and changing lives in a very profound way. And I have been very blessed with having attended many of these events, and every single time I witness something else that expands my own perceptions of what's possible. You know, so miracles are now the norm in our community and at these events, and that it's a phenomenal place to live from. So at these events, you push us to get beyond ourselves. And what we find time and time again is that when we get beyond ourselves, we find something greater, we find wholeness. And it's in that wholeness that we find the magic. So I'd love to start there, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sally. I'm just a curious person, always have been interested in human potential. And I think this particular time in history, people are waking up to possibilities. And you have to admit that when you become aware of something that didn't exist before, there's a change in consciousness. And so I think people, because of information at this current time in history, are just more informed. And because they're more informed, they're more conscious of possibilities. And so when you take a group of people and you give them sound scientific information, and as you said, science to me is the contemporary language of mysticism, that science can demystify the mystical. And if you can combine a quantum model of reality that says that somehow you're connected to everything, that your thoughts have an effect on the nature of reality, and if mind is an important element of that, then we better study and understand what mind is. So if you can combine some neuroscience, some neuroendocrinology, with some psychoneuroimmunology, the mind-body connection, in epigenetics that says that you're not doomed by your genes to be a certain way your entire life, that you could actually change your gene expression. So if you can take those ideals, those different models of science, and come up with something that represents a new model of being, and people can philosophically, theoretically, and intellectually understand it to the point where they can repeat it. It's important for them to repeat it, because if they can't repeat it, it's not wired in their brain. So if they can explain the what and the why and understand that model, we know that then the how gets a little bit easier. So if you can then put people in the practical experience of taking that information, that philosophical information, and making it practical, initiating it, applying it, personalizing it, demonstrating in some way, a certain percentage of people will actually do it properly, and they'll experience some type of transformation, some type of change. The experience then will enrich their brain circuitry and produce a feeling. And that feeling then teaches the body to understand what the mind is intellectually understood. So when we started out on this journey, it was primarily philosophical. It was, yeah, you could probably heal your body. Yeah, you could probably create a better life. But when we started actually seeing people change their health to all kinds of great measures, that's when I knew that it was time that we had to start taking measurements and looking to see what was going on in the brain. What was going on in the heart, in the gene expression, in the immune system, and in cellular biology, cellular health. And so we assembled a team of scientists and researchers to study common people, not anybody that was different, that had 40 years of meditation experience or was in a monastery or had any intellectual training. We wanted to just focus on common people. And so the research and the way we teach what we teach is from looking at what works and what doesn't work. We've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of brains. We've looked at thousands and thousands and thousands of different hearts. So we've studied all kinds of gene expressions. We've looked to see what it is that's actually built. Like, how do we take it from the brain to the body and all the way down to the cell? And, what is that model? And so we have great evidence now in our scientific research about human potential. And we have great evidence and testimony in so many people who have actually applied what this formula of understanding of change could be. Yes. And we started seeing them standing up saying, my cancer's gone, my MS is gone, my lupus is gone, my Parkinson's is gone. I was paralyzed, now I can lift my arm. I was blind, I could see. I was deaf, I can hear. You start seeing some really dramatic testimony, and that testimony is the truth. That is that person is an example of the truth. And when people stand on the stage in our workshops and they tell their story of how they heal themselves, I just witnessed one 2 days ago at a workshop I was just at, and I watched the audience, and there wasn't a person moving. Everybody was just fixed on this person telling the story of how she healed herself, and it was beautiful. And she had all the scans, all the results, and everything was, and it's a 4-minute mile. You break that level of consciousness, back to your question. And so you pierce through a level of unconsciousness to a greater level of consciousness. Now, there's evidence in front of you. It's possible, a greater possibility, a greater consciousness. Someone left a footprint for someone else to step into. And so we have evidence and testimony of evidence in scientific measurements, and evidence becomes the loudest voice. And so what we noticed is that if we could teach people really how to get beyond themselves, and what would, because that's what you asked, what does that mean? And we saw people's brains get worse when they were analyzing their life and trying to figure out their life, that they were driving their brain into higher stress levels and higher arousal states and making their brain more incoherent. We saw that analysis isn't going to do anything, that we have to get beyond the analytical mind. So we started figuring out ways to build an understanding of a model that we could teach people, that they could, by volition, be able to change their brain waves and learn how to do that. And what was it that helped them do that? And once they got beyond their conscious mind into their subconscious mind, then could they rewrite a program? Could they rewrite a behavior? Could they change some fundamental aspect of themselves? And if it was no longer about them healing, but it was more about whatever it was that the program was in the way of them healing, that's what it became about. They became more interested in the process of change than, and they understood that the side effect of that would be a change in their health, which is pretty much what we see over and over again. So it became something different, and we were able to teach it based on what we studied. And we know so many things about how the brain and body work, and now there's a movement taking place, and there's enough people doing it that it is becoming a little bit more normal, which is a great time for me. Absolutely. It's
incredible. And even, in spite of COVID, this community has been building and building and building. You were so gracious to do some online courses for us so that we could really keep that group coherence, that group consciousness within this work. Because yes, there is something, isn't there, about doing it within a group, that group consciousness that's more powerful. When I'm sitting here meditating on my own, you can almost tap in with those people you've been with before. But when you're in a room with 1,000, 2,000 people, incredible things happen.
Yeah. And we've actually measured the energy in the room, and we know that when people start getting their energy, we know you can measure energy. When people's energy becomes more coherent, the interference constructively begins to build bigger amplitudes, and that's greater energy. So there literally is a group of people that are becoming more entrained, more coherent, and that coherent energy creates the energy for healing, or the energy for miracles, the energy for the mystical. It's in the air, because people are actually changing their energy, and it's contributing to the field, in a powerful way.
Yes, and you always say to us, you cannot change until you change your energy, and this is what it's all about, isn't it? So you've mentioned there healing, and at these week-long events, we go, we spend the week. You forcibly take us into a journey beyond ourselves. We find this wholeness. We find everything we want within there. We don't want for anything more. But then what can we do with this? How can we help other people? How can we help? How can we serve? And by the end of the week longs, you have us healing other people. So I know that this is one of your happy places to be, is in a room full of people with the intent that want to heal and the energy that's high enough that we can do great things. Do you want to talk about that for a little?
Yeah. Well, let me finish that thought on wholeness, because one of the things that I did discover as a result of talking to numerous people that really experienced profound transformation is that people think, they come to the work for a lot of reasons. They may want to come for health. They may want to come for wealth. They want to come for success or the mystical, or just to be a better person. But what we found out over time is what everybody really wants is wholeness. That it's the process of becoming that really makes the difference. And when people start really connecting to the emotions of their future before they happen, before that experience happens, they feel like they're already in the experience. They feel like it's already happened, and that's an important element for the process of creation, because otherwise we're creating from separation or lack. And when people start managing their intentional thoughts, when they manage their emotional states, when they trade survival and limiting emotions for elevated emotions, and you teach them a practical tool on how to get back into a state of more wholeness, they're starting to demonstrate a level of self-love. And we see what that looks like in the heart. It gets highly organized and highly coherent. We see what happens in the brain. It gets aroused, and the arousal is not fear, and the arousal is not pain, and the arousal is not aggression. The arousal is this state of ecstasy, or this state of bliss, and it's coming from within the person. Now, this is an important point, because now they realize that there's nothing out there that they thought that they want could make them feel the way they're feeling when they start managing their inner world, right? So you start seeing that people start feeling like they're so whole they no longer want anything. And that tends to be the paradox of how their dreams actually happen, because now they're no longer creating from separation or polarity. In fact, they're creating from wholeness, and wholeness means that it already has happened on a biological level for people. So learning how to create from wholeness then creates this crazy thing where you feel so amazing. You feel so in love with life. You feel so grateful to be alive that you want other people to feel the way you feel.